Hello book people, PT here. It's been a while since I've talked about the books that I'm reading, so I'm going to do a series of videos this week. I'm going to do today recent nonfiction reads, and then I'm going to do recent fiction reads, and then recent comic book reads. So 3 separate videos. I just held up 2 fingers for 3 separate videos. 3 separate videos. Today I'm going to talk about not my recent nonfiction reads. I'm going to talk about also 3 recent nonfiction reads. Okay, the first one I want to talk about is Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari. Aziz, of course, I know him. I love him from his comedy, from Parks and Rec, and I recently watched his Netflix show Modern Romance, so I was interested to check out this book. I got it on audio. It was narrated by him, and he did a phenomenal job. There's a lot of funny little audiobook-only things where he kind of made fun of the listener for being too lazy to read the book, and when he got to like a place where it was a chart in a book, he'd be like, well, guess you missed the chart now because you were too lazy to read the book. It was pretty funny. He did a great job. The book overall was very different than I expected. I expected it to be more of like a memoir-ish, kind of like your standard comedian kind of book, like Tina Fey's Bossy Pants or something, which I like a lot. But this was like just really was a look at modern romance, and he had like a sociologist, I think, who was working with him and actually doing like real research on this book, and he also used a lot of like first-hand data that he got from like during his comedy shows. He has a bit where he has people come up and show him their text messages if they're text messaging with someone they're starting a relationship with or kind of flirting with or whatever. And so there's that, and he also did a lot of interviews. So it was about modern romance, and as a guy who's been married for years and hasn't been on the dating scene like really in the era of online dating. I mean, online dating existed, of course, when I was dating, but not like it wasn't widely used, and certainly there weren't, you know, Tinder and dating apps and things like that in those days. So man, I sound old. But it was really fascinating to me to learn a lot about that. One of the more fascinating things in the book is he also talks about dating culture in different countries and how different like cultures in the world, how their kind of local culture impacts the way that dating happens and the adoption of like dating apps and things like that. So I found it very fascinating. Side note, it was really funny. I had just read it and I was just thinking about, wow, what a intriguing look into this world that I know nothing about, when I saw that that Amanda Eagle had posted on Goodreads. She had read the book and she rated it. She was like, this is all common sense. Anyone who hasn't been living in a hole for the last 15 years obviously already knows all this stuff. And I was like, shout out to Amanda. Amanda's great. Definitely go check out her channel. That just made me laugh because I was just thinking about, oh, how fascinating. And then she was like, common sense. So that was funny. But yeah, I recommend it. I enjoyed it. I guess if you're more knowledgeable about the current dating scene, maybe it would not be as interesting to you, but it was still very funny, I thought. All right, the next book I want to discuss is Console Wars, Sega Nintendo and the Battle That Defined a Generation by Blake J. Harris. Get ready for me to show my age again, because this is a book about the early 90s, basically, when Nintendo ruled the video game scene and the upstart Sega came on the scene and kind of battled for them. It's a business book. It's like all about these 2 businesses and like the business moves they make against each other, but it's kind of written like a thriller almost. It's like really fascinating and super exciting and interesting. I listened to this on audiobook too and really enjoyed it. I probably enjoyed it more too because I was a kid during this time, and I like remembered like when they would talk about like a Genius commercial that Sega put out. I could like remember that commercial and be like, oh yeah, I remember that. Seen that when I was little. So that was fascinating, but I've never read like a business book that reads so much like a exciting kind of thing. It really put me in the head of, really, even though it's called Nintendo, Sega, and the Battle That Defined a Generation, the vast majority of the book is really from Sega's perspective. So it really put me in the mindset of the heads of Sega and what they did to like try and rise to prominence, and eventually what happened, why there is no Sega today. Lots of fascinating stuff and fascinating things about like how we almost had the Nintendo PlayStation and we almost had the Sega PlayStation also, and the Nintendo 64 was almost a Sega product, and all kinds of crazy things like that, that if you were playing video games in the 90s was definitely fascinating to me, and would probably be to you as well. So if you have any interest in business, even if you don't usually like business books, I think you'd probably like this one. Check it out. The final nonfiction book I want to talk about is Hammerhead, The Making of a Carpenter by Nina McLaughlin. So this is a book about a woman who is a journalist, and one day she's kind of like just unhappy and in her job and questioning kind of her life and things like that, and she sees an ad for a carpenter, a female carpenter who's looking for an apprentice, and is encouraging women to apply. So she decides to apply, and she gets that apprenticeship, and she quits her job and starts learning to be a carpenter. And it's a fascinating book because she knows absolutely nothing about carpentry, even like tools. Like, I think she knows the difference between a Phillips head and flathead screwdriver, but that's like pretty much the limit of her knowledge. She has no working knowledge of tools at all. And it's very interesting watching her learn. And then also, I mean, a big part of the book is talking about like our society's kind of like gender expectations as far as jobs go, and it's really interesting as she becomes a skilled carpenter, where she kind of deals with like sexism isn't really on the job, even though most of the time she is like either the only female on the job or with her mentor, they're the only two females. Like, people on the job tend to treat her pretty well once they realize that she's skilled and she knows what she's doing after she learns and everything, of course. But where she does get a lot of face a lot of sexism is like when she goes to Home Depot or Lowe's or something to buy stuff. Like, you know, the workers be like, "Oh, you got a little project going," or something like that, when she's of course going to like redo some crazy kitchen or whatever, and she's in charge of this huge job. Or like when she's carrying equipment like out on the street or whatever, guys will be like, "Oh, let me help you with that," like, and definitely act like she doesn't know what her tools are that she's carrying and things like that. Really interesting. And then the other thing it tackles is just the idea of like her family and friends and things like that are kind of a little bit baffled and almost disappointed when she leaves a career in journalism to become a carpenter. She's a smart woman, and they're like, "What are you doing? This is weird." So it does examine like also our society's kind of expectations on white collar jobs versus trades, and like you know, that is kind of expected in some cases that you're gonna take a white collar job, and a lot of people miss out on the trade. She talks a lot about like what the benefits of it are, and the joy that she finds in it that she never found in her white collar job. So yeah, really fascinating book, and made me think a lot. Made me want to start working with my hands, because I know just about as much about tools as she did when she started, and I have a lot to learn. But I think it'd be cool to build a bookcase. I might try that this year. One of my little personal goals. So there you go. Those are 3 books, 3 nonfiction books that I read recently. I'll be back again tomorrow with my recent fiction reads. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.